In this video, I'm going to discuss why our natural human sense of trust can be extremely detrimental to our intelligence and reasoning processes, and why it has been placed at the very bottom of the hierarchy of evidence. In other words, why is our sense of trust so untrustworthy? Let's start with how trust functions in the brain and evolutionary psychology. Our brains evolved in an extremely hostile social environment, but humans are also incredibly socially dependent on each other. So, to compensate for this dilemma, our brains evolved to have a sense of trust. And the images you see on the screen right now show you where trust-related information is processed in the brain. The two main regions involved in discerning whether you should trust someone or something are the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, also known as the VMPFC, right in the very front of your brain, and the amygdala, which is the tiny bulb near the bottom center of your brain. Both of these regions are involved in the assessment of risk, fear, anxiety, aggression, and threats to our safety. Now let's take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which emphasizes human needs and desires based on their importance to our survival and well-being. So taking a look at this chart, where do you think risk assessment, fear, and threats fit into Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If you guessed near the very bottom, you are correct. The only feelings that are more powerful and dominant in human behavior than our sense of trust are the need to breathe, drink, and eat. In other words, your brain was designed to prioritize your sense of safety above all other feelings and processes of reasoning. There are studies showing that when you sense a threat, your brain literally shuts down the processes related to things like critical thinking and empathy. Trust is generally not a process related to higher forms of critical thinking, and I'll prove it in a moment. You might already be making the connection between why your brain's trust process is so detrimental to our ability to objectively assess information, but hold on because it gets worse. You might not need a scientist to understand this, but studies have shown that when we're presented with information that contradicts our core beliefs, the brain literally exhibits a threat response. We associate people and information sources that disagree with us as threats or enemies. This occurs regardless of whether we're being presented information in a clinical setting or if we're in the middle of an argument with another person. The regions of our brain related to flight or fight response increase in activity, and the brains related to critical thinking shut down when we experience this contradiction to our beliefs. So that leads to the rhetorical question, do you think you are more or less likely to trust something if you feel threatened by it? Of course not. And there are also studies showing that these brain regions associated with assessing threats are also connected to our trust processes. I'll link studies I'm discussing in the video description, but you can just Google the titles you see on your screen right now. They're free to view. So how does this all relate to why our sense of trust is so untrustworthy? You've probably already figured it out, but to sum it up, our sense of trust literally chemically forces our brain to become completely unreasonable. So when we admit to having used our sense of trust to either accept or reject evidence, we are literally admitting that we've rejected much of our brain's critical thinking capacity in doing so. And this is why trust is at the very bottom of the hierarchy of evidence, because it statistically destroys our capacity to be objective. Yet humans are naturally designed to treat our sense of trust as superior to evidence. When it comes to objectivity and fact-checking, trust is, ironically, our enemy.